The Kansas City Chiefs are the number one seed in the AFC playoff picture for 2022's postseason in the NFL, following a 31-13 win over the Las Vegas Raiders in Week 18. I'm Brendan Dzwierzynski. He is Fulton Caster, and we're here to wrap things up for you after a dominant Chiefs victory. And to be honest with you, Fulton, I know the final score was decided by 18 points. It felt like a whole hell of a lot more than that. The Raiders didn't feel like they were ever even competitive in this game. I know they had a couple of drives where they got down close, weren't able to cash in for points. They just looked out of sorts. Their defense looked overmatched. And the Chiefs, they didn't need to be great in this game. And you look at the box score, you look at what Patrick Mahomes' numbers were, 18 for 206, 202 yards, 1 touchdown, didn't throw an interception. Chiefs did take care of the ball. That was a positive to see. But overall, I mean, even without playing a great game with just a, C+, B-, maybe if you want to be as favorable as possible, a B game for the Chiefs, they still utterly dominated. We'll get to the impact of what the number one seed means to the Chiefs and means for the AFC playoff picture coming up in a bit. But first things first, what's your initial big picture takeaway from yet another Chiefs win over the Las Vegas Raiders?
I think the first big thing I can think of with this win is this is the first time in quite some time that a Chiefs win was fully for 60 minutes incredibly unstressful. This felt like a game to where from the jump, the Raiders never really were in this game. They had a couple of drives early before the score got really out of hand where you felt, maybe Vegas could move the ball. Maybe they could get some things done. The Chiefs defense made some amazing plays, but overall, this just was one of the more complete games. It wasn't a top end game. I much like you would think it'd be generous to give it a B+ rating if you want to go even that high, but it was a game to where the Chiefs got a little fancy with some of their plays, which was more entertaining than I think some things have been in quite some time. But it was a game to where everyone protected the football. No one made silly mistakes. No one did something that you would, deem stressful or unnecessary. There weren't too many penalties that you think were just head scratching. No one committed any drops or any fumbles. Mahomes made, he didn't have a game to where his stats were crazy, but he made smart decisions, missed a few deep shots, but nothing crazy or anything like that. Overall, it was just a very clean, very simple game, and a game where Kansas City just walked in, took care of their business, and walked out, and just made sure that they accomplished what they set out to do, which was earning a number one seed.
The offense didn't need to be great, as I mentioned. And again, you run through the entire box score, and there's nothing that says, wow, oh my God. The closest thing we have to that is the play that Patrick Mahomes got his 1 touchdown pass on, the little flip at the last second to Jerick McKinnon, who again scores a touchdown for the 6th game in a row. He's more slot receiver than he is running back at this point, but hell, you'll take him any way you can get him. But I mean, look at the rushing totals for this game. Ronald Jones carries it 10 times for 45 yards in a score. Pacheco, 8 carries for 64 yards in a score. I mean, good totals. I mean, Pacheco, that's 8 yards an attempt, but nothing that makes you say, oh my God, this was incredible. And beyond that, I mean, Tony had a couple of runs. He ran in for a touchdown. 3 rushing touchdowns for the Chiefs is pretty remarkable. There is something kind of unique to that when you talk about the Chiefs of the 21st century. Receiving totals. Watson had the 1 big catch for 67 yards. He was the leading receiver for the Chiefs. Kelsey had 6 for 38. Juju, 2 for 35. MVS, 3 for 27. You don't usually only see 9 yards per reception for Marquez Valdes-Scantling. So all up and down the offensive side of things, nothing that was really remarkable in this game. But the 2 things for me in this contest, and we talked about this on 580 Sports Talk, my 2 biggest keys to the game for the Chiefs were shutting down or at least slowing down Davante Adams, and don't commit the stupid mistakes. Don't do the dumb stuff that's been killing you and keeping games close for over a month at this point. Let's look at key number 1. Davante Adams, did he have a good game? Yeah, he had a fine game. The last time these 2 teams played, he had 3 catches, over 100 yards, and 2 touchdowns. This matchup, and I know it's Jarrett Stidham at quarterback, 5 catches, 73 yards, no touchdowns on 9 targets. Did he not have his best day hands-wise? No, he did not. I've seen him have far better days. You see the Packers helmet behind me here in the old home studio at Shea Dzwierzynski. I've seen him have far better days. But the defense was good. Defense hit him a couple times, knocked the ball out, jarred it loose. They did a good enough job to limit him as much as possible. So that's a check mark for key number 1. Key number 2, don't make the dumb mistakes. Fulton, did Patrick Mahomes throw an interception in this game?
He did not.
Did the Chiefs lose a fumble in this game?
They did not.
Did they commit any sort of mind-numbingly stupid play on special teams?
I do not believe so.
No, that's all you needed to do in this game. And that effort, just being good enough at the basic fundamental part of professional football, was enough to run away in this game against the Raiders. So that's the big picture takeaway for me, is that, hey, all you had to do was not be ridiculously dumb and you were going to come away with a 3-score win. And that's exactly what happened. The other thing that stood out, defensively, the Chiefs were phenomenal in this game, and the Raiders were able to move the ball at least a bit up and down the field. And I've got the team stats in front of me here. The Raiders did end up with, only 279 yards. That's not all that many. Only had 9 drives for the game. There weren't a lot of possessions in this contest. It moved at a rapid pace. This game took under 3 hours in Week 18 in a game that actually meant something. So that really tells you how easily the Chiefs were able to take care of business in this one. But the defense for the Chiefs, I thought, was tremendous, especially situationally. Down in the red zone a couple of different times, the Raiders had to settle. They weren't able to get points. Some of that was play calling. Josh McDaniels at one point called the goal line fade for Darren Waller with his backup quarterback on 3rd down against the Chiefs. And I wanted to put my head through a wall, even though I wasn't even rooting for the Raiders, because that play call was so outrageously stupid. But I thought the Chiefs held up really well. You got a couple of really impressive individual performances. Number one on that list, it's got to be Chris Jones. 2.5 sacks in the game, 2 tackles for loss. He's the one who put the clamps on at the very end. He has been so good so many times this year. And because the Chiefs have not been especially impressive as a unit over the last several weeks, I think some of the luster has come off of his campaign for Defensive Player of the Year. He should still be in the running. He absolutely 100% should still be in the running for that. He was awesome today. And again, called game at the very end. Nick Bolton had 16 tackles. He had more tackles than the next top 2 tacklers combined for the Chiefs, both of whom are defensive backs. In fact, the next 3 top tacklers for the Chiefs in this game were defensive backs. Usually you don't want to see that, but overall, I thought Bolton played a pretty good game overall. Tackle statistics are kind of an iffy statistic. Just because you have a lot of them doesn't necessarily mean you played well. That's a true accumulation stat more than anything, because if you're waiting 8 yards off the line of scrimmage and you're making the tackle at that mark every single time, well, that's not all that great. You're giving up 8 yards of play, but you understand what I mean. And I think for Bolton, he did what he was asked to do in this game, played pretty well overall. So a nod to him as well for having a strong defensive game. And I think that was the difference maker, Fulton. Play smart football, do your job, play assignment sound defensive football, maybe get a superstar performance from Chris Jones. That's a recipe to blow out a crappy team.
It really is. And against a bad team, it's hard sometimes to take away the things you think can be done against higher level competition. But what the Chiefs showed in this game is that they can play a complete game without shooting themselves in the foot. Yes, the talent was against the Raiders. A Raiders team, though, that did put up 34 points last week on the San Francisco 49ers. It isn't like the Raiders came into this game in full 1-2-3 Cancun mode like we thought they were going to be when they benched Derek Carr. This is a team that was actively trying to succeed, and the Chiefs found a way to shut them down. Chris Jones now up to 15.5 sacks this year, tying his career high. He was fantastic, as he always is, in finding ways to blow up plays. Nick Bolton just being fantastic, like you said, was great to see. The Chiefs showing that they can play a complete game is a great sign heading into the playoffs, because that was our one question mark for essentially the last half of this season. Was everyone thought if the Chiefs don't hurt themselves, this is a Super Bowl team, because who stops them with the way they can be so efficient, especially on offense? Well, they showed in this game that they actually can play a game where they don't make those silly mistakes, that they can stay within themselves, particularly on special teams, the area that they have struggled in all season long. At some time, at some point in the game, you'd think that a mistake would be made, and they didn't make one in this game. And that's the important factor, and something you do enjoy seeing in this contest. And I think that should be the big thing to take away even going forward, is the Chiefs have shown an ability now that they can play a complete game. And more importantly than that, they're playing some of their more simpler football with more complete efforts at the end of the year going into the playoffs. And that's when you want to be showing, hey, we can play a game where we don't shoot ourselves in the foot. Because when you play teams like Buffalo, like Cincinnati, even potentially the Chargers in the playoffs, those are games you can't hurt yourself, because you're really going to put it, making it much harder to at least try and win the game when it really matters.
This game doesn't mean a great deal in the grand scheme of things, just in a vacuum, because we know the Chiefs are really good. We know the Raiders are undisciplined, terribly coached, not especially talented, and going nowhere fast. Not to really pour it on the Raiders, but frankly, I think you saw the Raiders fan in the first half with the big sign that said, "We deserve better." I think a lot of Raiders fans feel that same way about their franchise. So we're not going to take too long here because we've got a bunch of other stuff going on in the football world. Obviously, a win and you're in playoff game coming up tonight. That game will also be broadcast on ESPN. Some breaking football news just now as well. Adam Schefter of ESPN reporting that Sean McVay's future with the Rams is in limbo. So we'll let you go and get some eyeballs and some attention on the other stuff going on in the NFL world. But Fulton, before we wrap this up, how big is it? Final question. How big is it for the Chiefs to have the number 1 seed this year? Is it something that's just nice to have, or is that something that you think they actually needed going into this postseason? And now the fact that they have it, how big of a deal is it?
I think it's fairly big for this season in particular because look at the injuries the Chiefs are still kind of working their way through going into end this year. Sky Moore and McCole Hardman both did not play in this game due to injuries. They now have an extra week to try and rehab themselves, and the Chiefs finally get all 6 of their wide receivers healthy at one time. Something they haven't had since Kadarius Toney was acquired. Not all 6 of these guys have been able to even attempt to share the field together. That's important. Getting them healthy is proper. L'Jarius Sneed's been dealing with some nagging injuries since the last game. Nearly had to leave this game with an injury. He's going to have an extra week to heal up. That's massive. Joe Tooney's behind his lingering ankle injury. That's an extra injury and extra time. He can heal up. Frank Clark left this game with a groin injury. He has an extra week to heal up because for all the bad things we've said about Frank Clark for years and not playing up to his contract, he's had a very good year by the standards he needs to play to, which is not being elite, but being above average. And that's what he's been this year. I think on the grand scheme of things, it's so nice and so important to have that bye week with the number 1 seed for this particular incarnation of the Chiefs, because coming into week 18, they're not completely battered and bruised, but there are a lot of lingering injuries for some key players at key spots that now they get an entire extra week to heal up. And that is the most important thing out of any of this, is that some key guys at some key spots and even just some depth spots get to heal up for an extra week because the Chiefs took care of business and are in this bye.
Yep, that's the number one thing for me as well. And that's why when the scenarios were coming out this week and Mike Florio was getting information from some of the worst sources on earth, apparently, for some of his reporting about what the postseason might look like during the course of the past work week, when it was said, well, maybe you'll end up in a situation where the Chiefs and Bills, one will get to pick whether they get the bye or home field and the other will get the opposite. You take the bye every single time. Look, Chiefs fans, I get it. You love the noise at Arrowhead. I know everybody makes a big deal out of it. You take the bye week 1,000,000% of the time, and that's the biggest deal for this Chiefs team. Don't know the extent of Frank Clark's injury. I know Andy Reid was talking about it in postgame just a matter of moments ago. Said he's dealing with a groin strain. That is officially what Andy Reid just said. Not sure how severe it is. Hopefully it's nothing too bad. He'll be ready to go. But now you get an extra week. He can take a whole week off to rest. You're not going to miss anything. McCole Hardman can get back to 100% because as crazy as this is, as a longtime McCole hater, he's an extremely important part of this offense now. And you want to have that speed and that misdirection capability out there and that open field ability. So giving him another week to get rested. You have Sky Moore, get him a whole week. Hopefully he is able to go for whatever his role is going to look like in the playoffs. Joe Tooney, you want him to be able to get back to 100% healthy. Same with L'Jarius Sneed. These guys who have been banged up this week or over the last couple of weeks, that bye is absolutely massive. Even if the Chiefs were the overwhelming favorite to make it to the Super Bowl out of the AFC, which to be frank, they could be the favorite. I don't think it's overwhelming at this point, in my personal opinion. You want to be as rested as you can. And even more than rested, you just want to get healthy. You want to have as much rest for your beaten down, broken down bodies at this point of the NFL season as much as possible. So that is absolutely massive for the Chiefs. I do want to address one quick message, Fulton, from the Sports on 580 WIBW YouTube feed from our guy Vance. He's got 2 quick questions. We'll answer the second one first. Patrick Mahomes didn't need to do anything in the second half because this game was so easy and they were running the ball and doing misdirection and all sorts of stuff. They really didn't need him to do a whole lot. And yeah, those are accurate numbers. Secondly, were there just as many Chiefs fans in attendance as there were Raiders fans? I would actually disagree with that. I think there were far more Chiefs fans in attendance than Raiders fans. And There was the report before the game that Mark Davis is mad that there are fewer Raiders fans at these games than there are opposing fans, and there were better home fan attendance numbers in Oakland than there were in Las Vegas. No, duh, Mark. Obviously, that was going to be the case. Everyone in the world apparently knew that, except for Mark Davis. So, best of luck to you. Bad teams stay bad, usually because they're run poorly, and for the Raiders, look at who's at the helm of that franchise. That's going to do it for our Chiefs Instant Reaction postgame show. We will have more recaps coming up on our website, 580wibw.com. We'll also be recapping KU basketball and K-State basketball tonight. A lot going on for our local teams. And, of course, we'll be talking all about those games coming up Monday on Mic'd Up and on 580 Sports Talk. Fulton and Jake Laban on Mic'd Up from noon until 3. I'm on 580 Sports Talk with Dan Lucero from 3 until 6. So, until then, for my guy Fulton Caster, I'm Brendan Dzwierzynski. The Chiefs win. They beat the Raiders by 18, and they are the number 1 seed in the AFC playoff picture. We'll talk to you all